Errol Spence is expected to activate his rematch clause against Terrence Crawford at the end of the year in December specifically. You know, at 154 is the assumed weight, but I just don't know if it's a good idea, guys, because, you know, and this is coming from a guy who likes Errol Spence. I'm an Errol Spence fan, I'm a Terrence Crawford fan, but just looking at it from a factual standpoint, I understand it was just one night. I understand it was just one fight and the better man won on that night. But from that fight, I saw everything I needed to see. You know, you don't really know how to match up fighters until they're really in the ring, but that first fight told me everything I needed to see from Errol Spence and Terrence Crawford. Maybe the weight played a bit of a factor. Maybe it took some of the steam off of Errol Spence's punches. Maybe it weakened him in the legs and made him more vulnerable, and his punch resistance wasn't that good because of that weight cut. But there was a disparity, and a large disparity, in the level of skill between Errol Spence and Terrence Crawford. Terrence Crawford was landing basically with every shot he threw. The precision and accuracy in combination with the power was something that I'd never seen before. And to see how well-rounded he was, you know, you have fighters like Manny Pacquiao and Floyd Mayweather, just to talk about, you know, the previous, you know, era of great welterweights. You have Manny Pacquiao and Floyd Mayweather. Manny Pacquiao, who was mainly an offensive fighter, probably the best offensive fighter we've ever seen, against Floyd Mayweather, who is the best defensive fighter and more of a pop shotter, and, you know, someone who can move around the ring and, you know, hit you and not get hit. So these are types of fighters that are more one-sided. They're closer to offensive. Manny was closer to offensive, Floyd was closer to defensive. Here you have a guy like Terrence Crawford who can basically do it all. In addition, he can switch stances and do it effectively. I wasn't a believer in Terrence Crawford switching stances, but we saw him basically stay southpaw the whole fight and have a lot of success there. And I think it was something to really admire from Terrence Crawford, because he's well-rounded. You know, the defense, he wasn't getting hit with any shots. His defense was tighter than Errol Spence's. Errol Spence didn't look the same in there. He just looked like a different fighter to me. He was very vulnerable, but that's just testament to how great Terrence Crawford is. No matter how good Errol Spence was, Terrence Crawford was ready for anything that night, and it was apparent. It was apparent in the ass whooping that he put on Errol Spence. Errol Spence is the truth, but he just went in there against the fact, and that's Terrence Crawford. That's just the way this sport works. It's not fair sometimes. Sometimes you have all the fundamentals of the sport, but it's not enough against a guy who's so skilled, so talented, who has the speed, has the timing, in addition has that power. It wasn't enough. Errol has the better fundamentals, you can't doubt that, but against a physically stronger guy, a guy who hits harder, a guy who has better precision, and a guy who's meaner, who has more killer instinct, who has more dog. Errol Spence couldn't do anything on that night. I don't care if the fight was at 154. He wasn't beating Terrence Crawford on that night. It had nothing to do with the weight. I'm not saying that it didn't help. It didn't help Errol Spence that, you know, he had to drop basically 30 pounds to make weight, you know, within 2 months in training camp. I'm not saying that it didn't slow him down or maybe made him weaker and lessen his ability to take big shots from Terrence Crawford, but he doesn't get hit like that, period, you know, and against his other opponents. And that's what we're forgetting from Errol Spence. It wasn't about him losing the weight. It was about his ability to hang in there with a guy like Terrence Crawford. And from that third round and on, it was apparent that he didn't belong in that ring with Terrence Crawford. And that's not to say he's not a great fighter. That's just testament to say how great Terrence Crawford really is and how no one can really mess with him. Sean Porter put on a better fight than Errol Spence did. Got dropped twice, you know, and ultimately got stopped, but that was in the later rounds, the championship rounds. Errol Spence, he was basically ready to go at round 4. And a lot of people say Terrence Crawford was waiting for the right time. I think he just, you know, he's a good guy. I think he's a good guy and kind of let Errol Spence, you know, hang in there a little bit longer, but it came to the point where it's like, all right, I gotta finish you now. Because I really do think if Terrence wanted to stop Errol Spence earlier, he could have, but he chose not to. He chose to wait, tire Errol Spence out even more, and then went for it. Made his life easier. But in actuality, I think Terrence is so good that he could have gotten Errol Spence out of there in the 4th round if he really wanted to. That might be a crazy take, but the way Errol Spence was off balance, the way he was getting with so many flush and clean shots, man, I think he was ready to go in, you know, the 4th round. So to see the to see the 9th round stoppage, as a fan of Errol Spence, I was kind of like, oh, thank God they stopped the fight, because after all that beating, after all that punishment, you couldn't help but say, this guy didn't belong in there. You know, it was like, it's for his own good and safety, his long-term well-being. Errol Spence, it isn't a good idea to take this rematch with Terrence Crawford, even if it is at 154. We're all going to watch it. You're going to make millions of dollars in the process, but is it worth the squeeze to go and risk your health and potentially take that same kind of beating? And it could be even worse. You know, we don't expect it to be worse because we expect you to adjust and make tweaks to your game plan, but against a guy like Terrence Crawford, there's only so much you can do. In that fight, I was kind of saying, I don't know what Errol Spence could really improve on or do better. You know, Terrence is just on fire here. You know, he couldn't put out the fire that was Terrence Crawford. And, you know, it just shows that there's levels to this sport, and Terrence is on another level. But let me know in the comments what you guys think. Do you guys think that Errol Spence should activate his rematch clause against Terrence Crawford? I'm kind of in the fence. I'm leaning closer towards a no, but ask me in a few months, I might change my mind and want to see Errol Spence back in there. But it's more so, I say more so no because of the health, not because I don't think he can compete. I think it's more of, you know, the car crash, you know, the detached retina. How has that played a role? And then now taking that beating from Terrence Crawford. I don't know. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. I'll be reading them, but let me know what you guys think. And I appreciate you guys watching, always tuning in, like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll catch you guys next time. Peace.
That's going to do it for another Nads Fight Media video, guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. It's been your boy, Matt Nabong, with another video. Hope you guys enjoyed it all. Thank you guys for the constant support. Salute to y'all always. It's been your boy.